Josh and Melanie White had been married for 5 years and were considered the perfect couple by everyone around them. They met at a birthday party of a mutual friend and had been inseparable ever since. The couple had no children, which couldn't but upset Josh, who had long dreamed of having an heir. This is partly due to Melanie's temper. The woman always wanted to be the center of everyone's attention. "We can have kids later. I'm still young, and I want to enjoy my life instead of being stuck at home, changing diapers all the time," the wife said. Josh didn't share his wife's opinion and believed that their family was definitely ready for a little baby. Working 12 hours a day in a stuffy office, the man dreamed of returning home to be greeted by the laughter of his son or daughter. But Melanie had a very different take on the situation. All the woman cared about was having fun and living for her own pleasure. Josh was the breadwinner of the family, while his wife was mostly left to her own devices and spent days driving around the city in her brand new Ford, which Josh had to take out a loan to buy for her. Meanwhile, Josh was driving a beat-up Chevrolet and was in dire need of a trip to the shop. Nevertheless, the man never complained about it and seemed to be content with what he had. Being a complacent and calm man, Josh never fought with his wife and never reproached her for not having a job. However, there came a point when Melanie started behaving rather strangely. First of all, it was her endless trips to the city, which didn't seem to have any real purpose. Josh couldn't understand why his wife spent so much time behind the wheel if she didn't have a job to go to. "Honey, my friends and I go shopping, to the gym, and have picnics. I thought you knew this," Melanie said and pursed her lips touchily. Choosing not to continue this conversation, Josh simply accepted his wife's explanation. The man trusted his wife and didn't want to criticize her hobbies or friends. But then, one day, Melanie got a speeding ticket and gave it to Josh to pay. When she got the ticket the first time, Josh didn't give it much thought. Anyone can make a mistake, it's definitely not worth fighting over, the man thought. However, it didn't end with just one fine, and 2 weeks later, Melanie asked Josh for money again. "I'm sorry, honey, I was late for a meeting, so I went over the speed limit, and I got pulled over," the woman said, lowering her eyes guiltily. Josh shrugged and promised to pay the fine. However, even though the man managed to keep his composure, he could feel that something was off. 2 speeding tickets in 2 weeks? That's a bit too much. Where is it that she's driving so fast? And why? Josh wondered. But when Melanie got a 3rd fine, the man realized that he needed to do something about it. As it turned out later, the speeding tickets his wife got weren't the only reason for Josh's concern. The fact was that this time, Melanie was at risk of losing her driver's license. That was due to her systematic violations of traffic rules, which were now all on her record. Tired of listening to Melanie's vague excuses, Josh decided to go see the patrol officer who'd been pulling over his wife. Deep down, the man suspected that the traffic officer could be prejudiced towards Melanie for some reason. But when the man saw the officer in person, his doubts were quickly dispelled. The officer who issued Melanie all 3 of her parking tickets was an honest person who didn't have a problem giving a detailed reason for each of the fines Melanie got. "Sir, I don't know why your wife was in such a hurry, but she exceeded the speed limit by almost 1.5 times. And that's despite the fact that I let her off with a warning at least 3 times before that," the officer explained. Josh frowned and started thinking. At that moment, all kinds of ideas came to the man's mind, and he was trying to figure out where it could be that Melanie was going. "Mr. Griffin, sir, do you know where this road leads to? Does it have exits? Or does it go in a straight line all the way to the fork?" Josh asked, having pulled himself together. The officer looked at the man in front of him and then said, "About 1.5 miles down the road, there's an exit to a dirt road that leads to an elite neighborhood. I'm willing to bet that's where your wife was going." To say Josh was surprised would be a huge understatement. What's going on here? Melanie doesn't have any friends from around here, Josh thought. Fortunately, the officer standing in front of him turned out to be a smart man who'd seen a lot in his life. Therefore, he quickly read doubt in Josh's eyes and immediately understood what exactly the man was thinking about. The fact was that Lieutenant Henry Griffin's wife had left him 3 years ago. It turned out that she'd been cheating on him for a long time. Therefore, Henry understood what was going on in Josh's soul at that moment. "Mr. White, sir, If you want to find out what's going on once and for all, I can help you with that. We could drive to the next post. There's a surveillance camera there, so we could see where exactly it is that your wife was going," the officer suggested. Josh's eyes sparkled with hope. In the depths of his soul, he was still sure that Melanie didn't go to that neighborhood and simply continued driving straight. His mind simply refused to accept the possibility that Melanie had been lying to him all this time. Having weighed all the pros and cons, Josh accepted Henry Griffin's offer. When they arrived at the next traffic police post, the officer told Josh to follow him inside. He sat down in a chair and started reviewing the CCTV footage. As it turned out a little later, Josh was incredibly lucky, since the footage he wanted to see would have been erased very soon. "You're lucky, sir. Another hour or two and you wouldn't have been able to see it," the officer explained. Josh nodded shyly and looked at the monitor. Soon, Melanie's Ford appeared on the screen. It slowed down and turned off the highway. Now, Josh had more doubts left. He realized that his wife had been hiding something from him all this time. The man was well aware that Melanie had no friends or family in this neighborhood, since only very wealthy people could afford to buy a house there. Having thanked the officer for his help, Josh went home. Of course, he didn't start a fight to sort things out with his wife. Josh needed proof in order to be 100% sure of what was going on. The fact that Melanie drove into the neighborhood didn't really mean anything on its own. Josh took a week off from work in order to catch Melanie in a lie. Now he could closely watch his wife and wait for the day when she went to the city. Much to Josh's relief, it didn't take long, and within a couple of days, Melanie announced that she wanted to go out of town with her friends. Trying not to show his true emotions, Josh nodded with ostentatious indifference and continued to watch soccer on TV. But in fact, Josh was simply waiting for the moment when Melanie would leave the house. The man planned on following her. Of course, Josh had no experience in doing surveillance, but thanks to the information he got from all kinds of spy movies, he managed to stay out of Melanie's field of vision. Meanwhile, Melanie took the exact same route as before. Having passed the traffic police post, she turned onto the dirt road. Josh felt in his heart that he would soon learn the truth. Trying to stay at a safe distance from his wife's car, the man slowly followed her in his old Chevrolet, all the while trying to drive around the potholes. Even from a distance, he could see Melanie drive up to a huge 3-story house surrounded by a high fence. She honked several times. Soon, the gates opened, and a dark-haired young man let the guest inside. That's a smart way to do it, Josh thought involuntarily. He couldn't see Melanie's car from the road, so if he hadn't been following her, Josh would have never been able to find her there. For a little bit there, Josh couldn't decide what to do. He realized that he needed to give the lovers some time so he could catch them in the act, so to say. Needless to say, the poor man was feeling terrible. His hands were trembling and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. The half an hour he waited felt like an eternity. Then Josh pulled himself together and started the car. He drove up to the gate and honked a couple of times, just as Melanie did. Although no one rushed to open the gate for him. Finally, he heard the keys turn in the lock and a young man appeared at the gate. Josh got out of the car and walked to the gate. At that moment, Melanie caught up with the owner of the house. She was wearing a robe and slippers on her bare feet. When she saw Josh, she understood everything without words. "Honey, it's not what you think," Melanie tried to explain herself. But Josh didn't feel like talking. Now he knew the reason behind Melanie's long absences and her speeding tickets. His wife was always in such a hurry to meet her lover that she completely disregarded the traffic rules. If it weren't for the vigilance of the traffic police, she would have managed to keep cheating on her husband for a long time. Josh just smiled and shook his head. He wished his wife a happy day, got back in his car, and started the engine. Josh wasn't about to start a scene. Having returned home, he called a lawyer and told him that he wanted to get a divorce. Melanie tried to reconcile with Josh and get him back, but it didn't work. Basking in the arms of her rich lover, the woman forgot that family was the most important thing in anyone's life. It was only when she left with nothing that Melanie realized what a huge mistake she'd made. But her repentance meant absolutely nothing to Josh, since he intended to start a new life with a woman who would be ready to truly love her husband and start a real family with him.